Yeah. So, hello, this is Bruce Calder again, VP of Consulting here at Claigan. So, we're going to do the fine details of the Canadian Plastics Registry, which is coming up for consumer products extremely soon. By the way, the presentation is the improved version. So, this morning's one was very good, but there's some additional details, especially around there's a lot of the questions around who is responsible. And this one is brand owner, while PFAS is primarily importer. So it's a little bit of difference. I always double think yourself when you're thinking of either one. One of the challenges of presenting, it's hard to actually look at your reference documents while you do it. And you have to do everything from memory. And memory is a fantastic thing, as good as it is when it's fantastic. But it isn't always. Okay, we have a lot of experience at the Canadian Plastics Registry. We've completed a lot of types of products for the registry already. Lots of different packaging. Consumer stuff, but a lot of also professional packaging, including like biodegradable peanuts and a huge range of things. And that's why I'm going to talk a little bit about low density and linear low density polyethylene, which is a bit of a bugaboo in the whole thing. We've done lots of large appliances, small appliances, consumer medical devices. By the way, if you see these pictures, you go, ooh, what brand is that? I literally took the first image on Google, so there wasn't any confidentiality thing. Consumer controls, test equipment, both consumer and professional, professionals in the year after. Printers and computer equipment, lots of stuff. So we have a lot of experience. What I'm going to talk about today is we've done this, like, and answered it and finished it. And so when you do it the first time, you don't really know what you're getting into. I've done it a lot. It's a lot more detail oriented than you might think. Um, so so the Canadian Plastic Registry Consumer Electronics and Consumer Packaging, the deadline for submission is September 29th, 2025. To put that in perspective, that's 1 month after our summer students leave. Our summer students just started. That's not very long. It's 5 months. And it's not trivial. Even if you're doing packaging, this is not actually easy stuff. It's not super, super work intensive. If you do it right, if you don't do it right, it's really work intensive and you're going to spend a lot of time. But there's a lot of work and pause and details need to be put together and feedback from other stakeholders. And it's not trivial. So, for example, in terms of also rush coming, starting to get up on the rush. I get in for the rush before A, you won't meet the deadline, and B, the costs will go up. So, like, all of these people have to do the Canadian Plastic Registry, not the actual people, but everything in the background, all of that packaging and the electronics, all of it has to do it. So a lot coming. Who's responsible? It's the brand owner if they're located in Canada. So it's funny. The way the decision making goes in the Canadian Plastic Registry is basically saying, hey, is the brand owner located in Canada? Yep, they're responsible for the importation and sales numbers. Question is it the sales numbers in general or is it sales numbers to consumer? And that's not necessarily clear, but it's placed in the market. But the brand owner is responsible if they're located in Canada. If they're not, it's whoever imported the product into Canada. And there's a bunch of other complexities. If you're the web provider here that's providing it for some marketplace seller outside of Canada, how that all works. They're not letting you get off because you're, Amazoning it or Temuing it in. They'll end up being responsible. But the company responsible has to have a Canadian business number. So the brand owner is the default one. If the brand owner doesn't have a Canadian business number because they don't exist here, it's the importer is responsible. There's some additional complexity around place in the market, but the default reporter is the brand owner in Canada. So they really want the volumes that the retailer sold to the consumer, but it's the brand owner has to report it. So it's really best efforts around that. So you have to report how much you've imported and how much you place in the market, which is basically sold, including lend, lease, give away. So it's not just sold, it's any way to exchange. If you give products away, they count too. I don't really expect people to give away that much volume of products, but it counts too. That said, whatever the base responsibility is, this is one big difference between the Canadian Plastic Registry and PFAS. If two entities agree and the second entity is Canadian, they can transfer. You can transfer the responsibility. So imagine, the importer is your Canadian distributor, and they're not really set up or won't do the effort for you, and you're in the U.S. or in China or elsewhere, and you can't do it because you don't have a Canadian business. You can then transfer responsibility to even something like us or another entity or a distributor. As long as both parties agree and one has a Canadian business ID, you can transfer responsibility reporting to them if they both agree. So the default is the brand owner. Brand owner doesn't exist in Canada, it's the importer. However, whoever that's the default in absence of doing anything else. However, two parties can agree, and as long as the reporter is Canadian with a Canadian business number, it can be reported by anyone. You could have a recycler. It could be, a third-party provider like us. It could be one of your distributors. It could be that you have 5 different business units importing into Canada, and each one by default, they're different businesses. They have to report separately. It can transfer it all to the headquarters entity and then report it together as long as they all agree. So the default is a brand owner. Brand owner doesn't exist in Canada. It's the importer. However, those are the defaults, though they can be transferred to someone else if both parties agree and the reporting party is Canadian. Because you need a Canadian business ID. You'll see that later. Everything revolves around this 9-digit number. Scope of the Canadian Plastics Registry, 2025 reporting for the 2024 year, consumer electronics. So this is electronics to be disposed of by the consumer. So you might say, hey, this is professional, or, I sell this type of pump, but households will buy this type of pump. It's about 20% of my sales. Okay, that's consumer. And if the amount of pumps you sell to consumers, that 20% is over 1 ton a year, it's in for reporting. There will be a 1 ton a year of consumer electronics, 1 ton a year of flexible packaging, and 1 ton a year of rigid packaging. Realistically, the way it's worded, the packaging includes both rigid and flexible in the 1 ton. Generally, most companies are not in that marginal ground. They're either well above or well below. This includes medical devices. So, you make a at home, sugar level test kit or whatever, or, breathing, stuff for sleeping at night, like a CPAP machine. Those are all in scope. Consumer packaging. So this is the packaging that goes home to the consumer. If the packaging, so imagine you sell apparel. Apparel's not in itself this year, it's in next year. And it comes in a poly bag. And when it goes to the store, the retailer, they take the poly bag off and the store disposes of it. That's not consumer. That's professional. But then again, the retailer sends the consumer the apparel in some kind of plastic bag, e-commerce or shipping, that plastic bag is be disposed of by the consumer and it's in. So it's what would be disposed of by the consumer at the end of life, whether in the garbage or in the recycling, that's what's in. If it's disposed of by a business, it's in the next year. And there's some very specific single-use plastics like takeaway products and a few hygiene products and disposable razors and a few very, very select things. Most single-use plastics are not in. And for most people, it's consumer electronics and consumer packaging. Phase 2, this is 2026 reporting. So that's the 2025 year. So that's this year, what you're selling this year. Professional electronics are in. Basically, if you're in scope of EU ROHS, you're in scope of this. It has pretty well the same exclusions as EU, large scale industrial tools, stuff like that are excluded. Medical devices are in, most control monitoring in. Professional packaging's in. So the wrap on the pallet that's disposed of by the retailer, that's institutional. That's 2026 reporting. But the packaging that goes to home, that's consumer. That's 2025. Apparel and textiles themselves are in. The plastic parts like nylon and PVC and PTFE, not the cellulose parts. Cellulose like rayon is not in, or cotton. Cars are in, and they should. So again, if you're professional electronics, not until next year, but I really would be starting now. It's non-trivial for you to do your plastics. Just been doing it a lot. It's gonna be non-trivial for you. Construction, insulation and piping and all that kind of stuff. Fishing and agriculture, most of the netting and ropes are actually all plastic. And in 2026, industrial institutional waste. So right now we're looking at reporting importing numbers, sales numbers, and if you manufacture products in Canada, manufacture numbers, but also in 2026, disposal numbers. So if your business disposes plastic waste, whether in garbage or in recycling, you have to report it. It could be from manufacturing operations, distributions, employee waste, restaurant service. It doesn't matter. If you get over 1 ton a year in plastic waste disposed of by your business, which manufacturing operations get there really easily. If you're just straight employees, you need about 100 employees to get to about a ton of plastic waste a year. It has to be in Canada. So this is again Canadian centers. So the 2026 reporting is for the current 2025. And the big thing you need to be doing right now, if you have facilities in Canada, is how many garbage bags and recycling bags do you dispose of a week, and how heavy are they? Because it's going to be a little hard to do retroactively. We can help you with what the plastics are in those and what's the base plastics, but we can't determine how many bags you do in a week or a month. That's you. So how many kilograms of waste are you doing a week or a month right now or a day? We can help you with the plastic content is we have a whole process for that. But right now, you have to be tracking how much waste you do. Now, is that deadline real? Yeah, so it's actually 3 weeks ago. The Canadian, we did some webinars. In between the first and second webinar, the Canadian government sent out a notice saying, hey, the plastic registry is due September 2025. It's mandatory right there. You need to do it. It's a mandatory thing. It's actually one of also the main parties. Whole platform has this piece in it. It's a big deal. Again, I forgot earlier, and it's coming up behind me, which you can't see, is if you have any questions, feel free to submit it into the control panel. I'll get to as many as possible. I should get to all of them. And if I don't, though, contact me afterwards. I try to get to all of them. Fortunately, today's presentation is relatively concise, brief, so I should get to a lot of questions. One of the problems with some of the questions this morning, the question's very good, is sometimes the convolutedness of who's responsible is complicated. Phase 1, 2025 reporting. Again, consumer electronics, consumer packaging, some very specific single-use plastics like takeaway containers. Phase 2, September 2026, it's professional electronics, professional packaging, apparel and textiles, transportation, construction. And, if you have warehousing, it'll produce enough waste. All business waste, if you're over a ton, counts, but warehousing will easily have it. Stores, if especially a chain, will have it. Hospitals, easily. I went to a hospital a month ago, nothing major. Went through it. The amount of plastic waste coming out of that facility probably breaks the ton limit almost every day. And then schools, like it could be the elementary school system, it could be your universities, all they have to report their plastic waste in 2026. So kind of a big deal. And if you make medical devices, once the hospitals really clue in, they have to do this, they're going to put a lot of responsibility on you. What are the plastics? If you're over 1 ton of a category, so each one of these categories, each one of these blocks to report, you have to be over 1 ton. You have to be over 1 ton of a consumer electronics, not 1 ton of the plastics in the consumer electronics, 1 ton of electronics, 1 ton over 1 ton of consumer packaging, over 1 ton of professional electronics, over 1 ton of cars. That one's easy. Waste from a warehouse or your operations, over 1 ton of plastics waste from your operations. So those will bring you into scope. Now, to put in like perspective, how big a lot of this has to be done. This is the video. There's a little bit of an Easter egg in the end. So anybody watching, I definitely recommend the Easter egg at the end. So all of this has to be plastic registry. The packaging, the electronics, all of these things have to do plastic registry. That's Claire. Claire is a good sport at coming. She definitely made the face you'd expect from somebody doing the plastic registry. So she's also pretty good at this sort of thing. So what you have to report is not just the usual 7 plastics. There's a lot. And the first 6 are relatively straightforward. The other category has many different groups now, and the none, there's a whole bunch of other ones that don't even classically count as plastics. They're thermoset. They wouldn't normally even be a 7. This is like your circuit boards is other thermoset resin. This is all reportable. And there's a little bit of mistakes. Linear low density is commonly seen as a 4, actually. Linear low density is normally reported as low density. We don't see linear low density reported as a 7. It's reported as a 4. Which makes it really complicated because a lot of the things with a 4 on them, a low density polyethylene, when we test them, they're linear low density. So number 4 is theoretically low density polyethylene. So if you're packaging, what are you reporting? There's low density polyethylene. Actually, a lot of them are linear low density. A lot of poly bags and stuff like that are actually, even though the 4 on them, are actually linear low density. High density and low density, linear low density and high density are like a spectrum. So basically, as the bonds, low density has very few closed bonds. As the bonds close, the density, very specific gravity, goes up very marginally. And we can see in our testing as it moves through the spectrum from low density to high density, it's not like 3 different things. Low density, linear low density, high density, not really 3 different things. They're like different stages, semi-arbitrary stages in the same thing. Linear low density is partway through. The difference when we test between high density and linear low density, they're virtually identical. The big difference as you get to high density, it starts to become a little more cloudy or opaque. The test results for high density and linear low density are virtually identical. What you start seeing is the cloudiness as you get into high density. It's not a lot differentiating. And a lot of things we see that are labeled low density are really linear low density on the packaging side. Polystyrene, right there, 6. and PVC, your clamshells. We also see lots of other types of packaging, but those are the main ones. We do also see PLAs and the new bio-based thermoplastics down on the bottom. So you have to report all these, and you have to report not packaging, you report the kilograms of each one of these for the flexible packaging and the kilograms for each one of these for your rigid packaging. You also technically report filled and unfilled separately. So if the packaging is around a product, it's filled. If you just sell packaging, it's unfilled. They're actually reported separately just to make your life difficult. Electronics example. So main connector and circuit boards and a lot of other parts of electronics. About a third of connectors and circuit board are polyester, polyethylene terephthalate. The other connectors are from polybutyl terephthalate. It's actually not the same thing. They're very similar. They're both polyesters. A polybutyl terephthalate is different than polyethylene. It's monkeys eat peanut butter. It's a very important thing in the chemistry side. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. Methyl, ethyl, propyl, butyl. Monkeys eat peanut butter. So polyethylene, monkeys eat E2. Butyl, eat peanut butter, 4. They're very similar, but they're actually different plastics. So this polyester, polyethylene terephthalate. And then there's the polybutyl terephthalate, which is about another quarter of your connectors in the circuit board. Nylon, super common connector in electronics, usually white, but it doesn't have to be. PTFE wire. I also will add here some polycarbonate. Polycarbonate housing. Polycarbonate isn't one of these. It's in the other category. ABS has its own listing. Polycarbonate's under other, as is other plastics like PPO. A lot of others are under other thermoplastic. And your circuit boards are other thermoset resins. And as is most your microchips use thermoset resins in them. Now, your microchips don't really contribute anything to weight. It's one of the reasons we use models for completed circuit boards. Your connectors contribute a lot more weight than any of the chips do. And then the actual circuit board contributes a decent amount of weight in thermoset resins. Now, what you have to do is you have to take for each category. So electrical equipment, appliances is a different category in electrical equipment, IT equipment. But then you have to take all your appliance plastic data and merge it. So you merge your electronics plastic data by category, combine it with your import and sales data. So you have to take the sales data basically, so each washer, each dryer, each refrigerator by its sales to get how much PVC or polycarbonate or ABS it has, merge it together to report it. So you merge all, because you're not reporting refrigerators, you're reporting the number of kilograms of PVC in appliances that you imported and the amount of PVC in appliances you sold in Canada in 2024 into the regulatory services platform. Then you have to do the same thing with your flexible packaging. You have to combine that with your sales data, merge it in there, and then your rigid packaging. So each electronic category, appliances versus IT equipment, are reported separately than each other and reported separately than your flexible packaging and reported separately from your rigid packaging. And they're all combined with whatever the sales data is to give you volumes to report the kilograms of each. Just a bit of work. By the way, that's my webinar, Brian. He make a lot of appearances. This is very typical situation. Somebody trying to put all this together. If we did only once, this would be very difficult. We just done it many, many times. There's a way to merge it all together. There's a lot of thought process though. Additional complexity. You don't sell one refrigerator. You sell 44 different refrigerators, which could be in professional equipment, laboratory equipment. It's very true. It's usually not one thing you sell. You don't sell one air conditioner, you sell 31 air conditioners. So how do you handle that? So the import and sales data, which you also need, you'll need import data, sales data. Because you actually have to report separately. Place in the market, sales is basically placed in the market. It also, you'd have to, if you lend, lease, rent, so on and so forth, it's included in place in the market. You have to include that too. For most companies, the sales data, import data is reported separately from sales data. I'll show you. And you have to report by province and territory. We have 3 territories, by the way. Smiley face. Oh, because you have to report the kilograms of each plastic imported by category into Canada and each kilogram of each plastic sold or placed in the market technically in each province. Yeah, it's a bit exciting. Okay, so what we do, since we've done this a lot, we've learned, okay, instead of creating 41 product-specific plastic models, which you can, but it's a lot of work and you don't have to, you choose a representative, in this case, refrigerator, large appliance. You use it as a model. You do the work for it. Then you create a plastic data set for that product. And then apply it to the related products. scaled by weight. So if this one's say 60 kilograms, that one's 70 kilograms, you have to, 70 over 60, it's numbers, but you can do that. It's allowed. It's actually in representative bill of materials is in the actual registry itself and guidance. So you can do that. It's a much more efficient. When you blend the numbers together, it gets pretty merged anyways. So for the example refrigerator, now no, there's still over 200 parts in even the example refrigerator, and we're not even including all the circuit board parts, which we don't actually do circuit board parts one at a time. We've learned it's actually pointless. There's a better way to do it. And all the compressor parts, which a lot of it's metal and rubber, and which are neither reportable, but does have some plastics. So what we do, we take an example refrigerator. The key plastic components are the outer housing, and plastic parts more than 50% of a major dimension. We've done enough products to know now that these are, for the individual plastics, the biggest contributors. If we look at the little plastics, they don't actually make enough difference. They have to be more than 50% of the width of one of the major dimensions. For fridge, that's width and height and depth. For your TV, the depth is not a major dimension, it's tiny. So it's width and height. Including insulation. This fridge will have tons of blown-in insulation. Plus the major assemblies. The wiring harnesses will actually add a lot of plastic in it, both the external ones and the internal. This thing will have wiring throughout. It actually does add a lot of plastic to it. And the circuit boards, not only does it add plastic, it adds a lot of different plastics that the rest of the product has. And when you look at recycling, they'll be very interested in recycling circuit boards, so they really want that data too. And the pumps and compressors, which are generally not that much plastic, but they're actually a fairly heavy assemblies, and they'll have their own wiring and some other pieces. This is very complicated, by the way, even if you simplify it this way. So what we've done is we build models for internal wiring and external wiring. So what is it? What type of wire? What type of internal wiring, external wiring it is? Okay, just weigh it and apply the model to apply. So we don't just do models for the whole product. For very complicated assemblies, we've pre-built models. And instead of just trying to do this detailed, it's painstaking to go through one of those detail. We've actually done quite a few, say, circuit boards and wiring harnesses and figure out what the average wiring harness has and apply it, and what the average pump and compressor has in it, and apply those models. And once you blend it together, it kind of comes out in the wash. So we take two products, like when you take a tablet, like an iPad type product, and we take two different manufacturers' products. The innards are virtually identical. Whether or not we use models or we've done everyone basically individually are identical. What makes them different is the outer housings are a different material. They actually, at the end of the day, when you look at the final total plastics, they're what makes the difference. You have to report everything internally, but they're actually basically identical inside. The circuit boards usually come out on average. So what we do for the assemblies, we weigh them, like the circuit board or wiring, and then we use the Claigan model for them, and we create the output. We add together all, of course, the large plastics to create a final output. The end output, we end up with a model. So what's the model for that refrigerator, that oven, that dishwasher, that coffee machine? We create the models. And then we take your sales data, both imported and placed in the market. And then what you do is you match the model with that SKU. Now, the neat thing about, say, refrigerators, but many other products like that, SKUs aren't, when somebody sells refrigerators aren't the largest number of their SKUs. They're like, well, they sell refrigerators. Yes, but by number of SKUs, the biggest thing they sell is repair parts and spare parts by sheer volume, by number of SKUs. No, they're not as big or as heavy or as big as contribution. So we have to create models for the average accessory because their packaging will add up in particular. So you have to make sure you take that into account. Because once you take their sales data, you're going, what's this? I'm like, yeah, it's all the repair parts. Have a plan for the repair parts. And so basically you choose what model you have. And sometimes you choose two models. And the reason we have for that is things like lamps, where the base of the lamp could be, your lamp maker could be EVA, could be PVC, could be polycarbonate, and the shade could be polycarbonate or polyester, but they're mixed and matched. So what we've done is we create a model for the base and a model for the top. And it picks it, and if you're a lamp manufacturer, you just pick and choose which top model you have and which base model. So you can have two, and you'll see some of these rows have two X's in them. That allows you to mix and match without doing lots and lots of effort. Because if the base is polycarbonate of one lamp and the next base is PVC, their plastics are very different. And then we create the submission output. I'll show you what the actual output looks like. This is what you submit in the system. So this is our Excel version because humans are good with Excel. This is what you report that away. So you report 2811211, which is the NAPCS code, which is a Canada specific code. Supposedly North American, but it's really Canadian. for polyethylene terephthalate polyester resins. How many kilograms? They imported 372 in the products. They manufactured 62. So a lot of companies just import, not manufacture. We put manufactured numbers here just in case, hey, they made one coffee machine in Canada, whichever. How many placed in the market, which is separate than imported manufactured, 435 kilograms. And then by province, how many sold in each province. Now, you don't need the provincial sales data. You're allowed to use the average population percentage of each one, which means really Ontario, Quebec, and BC, and nobody else. A little bit of Alberta, I guess. And you're allowed to break it down by average population. It's one of the things. So you have to report all the polyesters for your appliances, all of the mostly polybutyl terephthalate, but the other thermoplastic polyesters. Then you report this column, low density polyethylene. And then you have to do the same thing again. You go all the way through all the different plastics for flexible packaging, how much low density polyethylene, how much linear low density poly, how much high density by each one of these. You have to report all these little numbers. And then the rigid packaging, how much polyester in rigid packaging, probably none, how much high density polyethylene, et cetera, how much PVC by kilograms, imported, manufactured, placed in the market. In 2026, if your facility, it's also how much you've disposed. And that's the 2026 facility disposal. There's another one for how much they've disposed. So the submission site is the Plastic Registry submission site. It's here. It's a regulatory services platform. It's the Federal Plastics Registry. So normally the French acronym comes first, so RFP, and then FPR. FPR is the Federal Plastics Registry. The one could be Registrar Fédéral Plastique. The funny thing in Canada is if you don't know the French word for something, you just say the English word with a French accent, and there's a good chance you're pretty close. It's not true in everything, but it is a bit of a cheat there. And usually everybody understands what you're talking about. People take it a little bit better if you actually say it with a French accent, which is fair. And of course, I grew up with speaking French in school. I don't do it, unfortunately, as much now. Usually you end up knowing like 9 out of 10 words, and the 10th word, you can't remember the French word. So you say the English word with a French accent, and it usually works out. And the funny thing is, if you listen to somebody speak in Quebec, there's a lot of French in there. Then every so often an English word makes an intrusion too. So it is relatively common. Okay, submission site. The status is you can register your company on the site or services platform, but submission doesn't start till September, so you can't really do anything. And I wouldn't register unless you're going to be the prime, because I'll talk about it a bit later. It's actually hard. You become the organizational prime. It's actually really hard to disconnect you from the company right now. And then if anybody else tries to do anything, it won't work. And the invitation system doesn't seem to be working terribly well. So I'll tell you what the fields are, but I wouldn't go do it right now. Let them fix it, because changing it afterwards is difficult. It's an understatement. What you need is the company legal name, company common name, your 9-digit business number. So the 9-digit business number, if anybody hasn't done a Canadian business number before, it's like 9 digits, and there's usually like RT001. That's related to the fact it's taxation. There's RC, there's a whole bunch of others. Ignore that. It's just the 9 digits. Once you get to letters, you've gone too far. And everything revolves around this. That's the key. You need this 9-digit business number, and everything revolves around this number. That's why also it has to be a Canadian company that registers, because you need this CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency number. Could be an Industry Canada number. Most of us think of it as a CRA number. You have to have the general organization email, like info@claigan.com, your general organization phone number, like 613-599, I think 4444, and the address. 10 Brewer Hunt, Suite 200. And the name and contact information of the organizational lead. And so this is what's critical. It revolves around the business number and this person. And once you connect the two, they're hard to disconnect. So you'll need to know that have this, but I wouldn't rush to it right now. You got lots of time, and it's actually not that hard to do. As long as you have the business number and you've agreed who's going to be the lead, it's not hard to do in a pinch. I just wouldn't do it right now unless you're really, really ready. It's a new system. It's still evolving. And you can't actually submit your plastics till September, theoretically. So other fine details, out of scope of reporting: metal, it's not plastic; glass and ceramic, the middle part of that fuse, and the metal part, not in scope. Rubber, like silicone rubber and nitrile rubber, are not actual plastics according to the NAPCS codes, which is one of the reasons why in the 2026 car tires also have to report, but I include car tires because I don't know what they're going to report, because the rubber's not in scope. They report the little cap that goes onto the end of the nozzle in the air part, in the air inlet. I can think of, because rubber's not in scope. Silicon rubber's not there, nitrile rubber's not there. They're not part of the plastics registry. I know they want to capture how much tires are disposed of, but it's rubber, not plastic. So wrong chemistry. And cellulose is not in. Wood, paper, and cellulose-based fibers, like rayon is a cellulose-based fiber, cotton, wool. Those are cellulose-based fiber. Polyester, nylon, those are more plastic-based fibers, and they'd be in scope. So apparel is in 2026. Cellulose is not under the plastics NAPCS codes. So cellulose is out, plastics are in. Again, reporting, it's that away. You report by category, by each electronics category. So you don't report refrigerators, you report appliances. You don't report computers, you report IT equipment. And then you don't report appliances alone. What you do is the number of kilograms of each plastic imported, manufactured, and placed on the market. So you do polyester, then you do polybutyl terephthalate, the other thermoplastic polyester, low density polyethylene, so on and so forth. So we have lots of experience. I've done a wide range of packaging, appliances, large, small, a lot of professional stuff, consumer medical devices, consumer controls, test equipment, printers and computer equipment. Again, by the way, if you're like, oh, what brand is this? No, I literally took, for confidentiality reasons, the first picture that Google came up with, just something represented. So these are the types of products we've already done, and we've done quite a few others, a lot of other exotics. There isn't much we haven't run into yet. So happy to help. Again, the deadline for submission, September 29th, 2025, for the consumer side. Professionals next year, automotives next year, apparels next year. Your facility waste is next year. But if you have facilities in Canada, you want to be tracking your number of garbage bags and the weight of each bag. We can help you with how you declare the plastics in it, what the average plastics are. We can help you with that, but we can't count your garbage bags for you. To put that in perspective, again, this is 1 month after our summer students leave, and they just started. So it's 5 months from now. It's not actually that trivial to do, even if it's just packaging. It's a lot harder than you think. Any questions? Again, if you submit any questions, feel free to put it in the control panel. I'll try to get to as many as possible. Cool, great questions. If toner cartridges are sold to consumers, toner cartridges will have to be reported as consumer electronics in 2025. What about toner resins inside these cartridges? That is a fantastic question. I actually have an answer for that written down, and I don't 100% remember the resin part. So the cartridge is a piece of electronics. It's going to be under its category. I can't remember if it's under IT or where printers fall. So the cartridge is a piece of electronics. It gets reported. The toner resins, if you import plastic resins into Canada, the actual resins, which I didn't talk about today, are reported in 2026. I believe they're in that category, but actually you can reach out separately. I do have actually a real answer for that, written down with justifications. One of the problems with the open-ended Q&A, like right now, like I had this morning, is trying to remember off the small details of your memory. So resins, like chemical resins, are reportable, plastic resins are reportable in 2026 separately. Resins have their own category. And the toner cartridge resin would normally fall into that category. I'd have to double check because they actually have plastics. Some of cartridge ink is actually a plastic, as opposed to just, oils or glycol or other things. But the cartridge itself is electronics. It would fall to consumer 2025. If industrial waste plastic recycled, they still included. Yes, for everything. Yes, but there's a but. So they're included. They're included for the 20. So if it would be disposed of by a business, it's in 2026 reporting, both from the importer, the seller, which is still a brand owner in most cases, and if it's disposed of by its business, the business disposing of it. And all the reporting is what you've disposed. In future years, I'm not trying to bother people with what's going to happen 2 years from now, but later on, you actually then report how much you've disposed, how much of that is recycled. So you can start reporting recycled percentages in later years. Right now, they're just starting with how much you get rid of. In the later years, there's how much you actually recycle as one of the categories. So it's still in scope. It will be reported differently in a couple of years. For consumer packaging, if our product is shipped directly from Amazon warehouse, is this part of the reporting process, or do we have to include this packaging in our report? So it's a very good question. It's the brand owner. So if it's the sales packaging around your product and you're the brand owner and you exist in Canada, then it's you. If you don't exist in Canada, it's the importer. By the way, these are the defaults. The Amazon packaging has Amazon written on it, and its e-commerce packaging is its problem. Also, probably one of the reasons why not all, a lot of, that's true, not all, a lot of Amazon packaging now is paper. but they do have plastic stuff. If it's their brand on the e-commerce packaging, they do the e-commerce part because it's their brand. You do the product itself if you have a business in Canada. If not, it's the importer. However, those are the defaults. Amazon will probably do its e-commerce packaging. I would take a guess there. But for everything else, you can transfer, even the e-commerce pack, you could transfer to a third-party report for you. So imagine your US entity, the importer is Amazon. Amazon, by default, if you're not in Canada, would have to report. You can come up with an agreement where another third party who agrees to do it does the reporting for you. But the default is the brand owner if they have a business in Canada. If they do not, it's the importer. In the Amazon shipping situation, the product is the brand owner's responsibility. However, the e-commerce packaging with Amazon on the top is Amazon's problem. A lot of cardboard product packaging has plastic coating to make it glossy. Is that reportable? It's a really good question. Technically, yes. It's a very interesting problem because it's coating on paper. What we've normally interpreted before is coated paper is paper and be disposed of. When we look at it, so we go to a municipality where we have waste calendars, and we look up coated paper, it ends up under the paper set. So we interpret that as paper at this point in time. If that moves to the plastic streams, we might reinterpret. Right now, we don't have specific guidance on that. So without guidance in this jurisdiction, we go to a different jurisdiction. That's usually one of the safest things to do. So in this case, we go to the municipality, look at when I recycle coated paper, which bin does it go into? Paper. Okay, it's paper then. It's a really good question. A lot of stickers and electronics are polyester. They are polyester. They are plastic. They normally don't contribute enough weight to the product unless they're very, very significant. What if we import into Canada, but do not place the product on the market for sales? Are we the only responsible for the import data and are retailers responsible for the sales data? So technically, the way it's written, if you have the brand owner is responsible for both sales and import if they have a Canadian business. However, you might not have any sales data to the end user. What you can use is your sales data to the retailer. That is sufficient. So it's what you place the market to the retailer. You can make a reasonable assumption that's what's sold. You can go through all the effort to figure out the retailer's numbers, but once you blend it together, you can't tell them apart really, and they'll be close enough. So close, a lot of this thing has a lot of close enough in it, especially year one. Good enough is year one. Better is year two. As good as possible is year three. So most companies are basically saying, hey, the brand owner is responsible. You can go through all the effort with the retailer to figure out what they actually sold, or you've placed the market. Once you put in the distribution channel, it's placed the market anyways. So just report it. So the brand owner, if you're in Canada, is responsible. Otherwise, it's the importer. No weird. Does dispose include recycle? Yes. At this point in time, it does, and it will later. Just disposed as waste and disposed of recycle will actually be two different reporting columns. So the column will be split in the future, but what about plastic coated fabrics? That's a really complicated question. We've been always seeing as plastic parts, same thing as plastic paper. If you looked at recycling, would it be part of the fabric? At this point in time, in absence of any other guidance, we're treating it as fabric. So if we look at the recycling and we looked at apparel in our jurisdiction, our municipality, it would say it's not plastic. You can't put it in the bin. It's fabric. So at the moment, if in absence of guidance specifically from Canada, from the federal government, we look at a different jurisdiction and say, hey, we're following, until you have guidance, we're following this jurisdiction's details. If we're wrong, like in good reason, and there's no real penalty for it. We're a business-to-business company based in the US, but we have a small Canadian entity, but our products are all imported directly by distributors in Canada. In this case, who's responsible? If you have a Canadian CRA number, you're responsible. Now you can transfer, your distributor could agree to do it. But you'd have to have an agreement. In default, if they're bringing it all in, if you have a business entity in Canada, the brand owner has an entity in Canada, however small it is, they're responsible. That said, if you can make an agreement with the distributor and say, hey, can you report instead? They're like, sure, maybe they won't. But we need a lot of technical information. So the distributor's weak point is they don't have all your technical information. They'll have like sales data, but they won't have any technical information, which makes it pretty hard. Could you please provide the presentation file, the references to review? Okay, everybody who registered will receive a copy of these slides. And the ones from the afternoon ones are better. So you guys are all benefiting for the better ones. I added some more details around brand owner to make things clearer. And the whole presentation, the recording will be up on YouTube, like the rest of our stuff, momentarily. There's actually even a shorter version of this one. It's a lunch and learn on the plastic registry that just went up last week. Would research and development facilities in high tech be applicable to reporting? Yes, if they have a reporting, if they meet the reporting threshold. They have to do the 1 ton of plastics imported or 1 ton of plastics waste. And of course, the imported, if the brand owner exists in Canada, like you're importing Dell computers, it's Dell's problem, that kind of thing. But if you have over 1 ton a year of plastic waste, which depending on what you do in research and development, if you were just employees, it takes about 100 employees to make about a ton of plastic waste a year, even with all their takeout containers. If you ever look at your plastic waste from employee stuff in North America, it's primarily takeout containers and some coffee cups and coffee lids and that kind of thing. But you have to meet the 1 ton threshold. Toners equal microplastics or toners of polyester and styrene acrylate. Then yes, you'd probably be under resins. I'm trying, of course, doing this from memory. Normally, you're a resin importer for the toner, and therefore it's a 2026 reporting. Strangely enough, the actual plastic resins report later than the packaging does. For apparel in 2026, provide uniforms to employees. Are we responsible to report or is the manufacturer? It's complicated questions, the brand owner. When you're buying, we'll say from, I'll make up a company, Acme Uniform Canada, it's a good question who the brand owner is. If you're just putting like your company's name on it, they, from all other compliances, fire, flame, whatever, they would see the company providing you as the brand owner. That is actually a complicated question. The brand owner for most apparel is your little tag in the back has the brand owner. They're responsible for the existing Canada. Otherwise, it's the importer. So if you're importing all the apparel into Canada for your employees and that entity, the little tag in the back, is not in Canada, then you're responsible. Of course, you have to get over 1 ton of apparel, and that's a lot. I work at a flexible packaging company. There's a whole bunch of ways you could take that. I'm assuming it's flexible packaging as opposed to packaging, which are really flexible benefits. I work for a flexible packaging company. Many of our packagings are multi-materials. Should I report the quantity of each type of plastic, or should we choose the easier way to identify the total number 7 plastics? It's a really good question, actually. One of the problems in electronics, for example, is they actually have glass. A lot of their plastics are glass filled, which still counts as ABS, but it's like glass or nylon, but it's glass filled nylon. It's not really the same thing, but the report is nylon. Do whatever you do it honestly. Now, it won't be what's going to happen in your multi-materials. So we often, a very common multi-material for everybody is ABS polycarbonate blends. That in electronics, super common everywhere. It's not ABS. So we report it in other thermoplastics. So often, if it's a mixed material, we end up having to move it. If it's all thermoplastics, we move it to other thermoplastic, which is a 7, but it's other thermoplastic. If they're thermoset, because normally you don't have thermoset and thermoplastics together, they normally don't work out. It can happen, but not really work out. So normally we have ABS polycarbonate blends, which is a blend, not a coating, but a blend. We report that as other thermoplastic. They're both thermoplastic, but they're not ABS. It's ABS polycarbonate. So we do that in the other thermoplastic. Same thing with resins. You know, it's a thermoset polyester resin, but it also has this other resin in it. So we put it in other thermoset. So when in doubt, put it in the other thermoplastic category if they're thermoplastics. And that's what we do for a lot of things. Because in a lot of ways, you can't recycle them as their individual thing. They're under the other category. PTFE is in the other category. Polycarbonate by itself is in the other category. It's a big category. If we don't manufacture in Canada and outsource manufacturing, but import into Canada, what to report if there are any exemptions? We sell to enterprises, not consumers. So it depends who the end user is. If it's the end users are businesses and they're the ones who dispose of it, then it's 2026 anyways. If you're the brand owner and it's imported into Canada and you exist in Canada, it's you. But if you import it, you sell it to businesses who then sell it or give it to consumers, even patients to take home. That portion of your sales is consumer, and that's 2025 for most things. So it's all around who the brand owner is, and then they have to report, if they're in Canada, importation and sales. If they're not in Canada, it's the importer's responsibility. Those are the defaults. They can be transferred to another agreeing Canadian party. Like, for example, we have a situation like that where it's just between the distributor and the US, it's just not working out. So the US manufacturer does the work and they transfer responsibility to us to report, which is an option. We're only reporting consumer packaging for items sold within Canada. Yes. So there is a whole extra level of complexity about export. So there's import and then there's place in the market. So it takes away so you import how much you import into Canada and then how much you place in the market, which have a big delta if you're exporting. Manufacturing, if you manufacture a huge amount, we export 90% of it, you actually report the entire amount you manufacture and then place the market the 10% you're not exporting. It is a bit complicated. In any individual situation, we can help with you. Our bubble wrap packaging and scope of reporting. Yes, they're normally, not exclusively, low density polyethylene. So yes. What are some of these co-branded? Who's responsible then? Either party. And it's not really well handled. Co-branded is an interesting problem. It's basically if it's a regulatory problem, who take care of it too. So usually they also co-brands have deep in their contracts details of who's really responsible. If you don't, it's a complicated, it can be either one. The Canadian government will basically blame both of you and have you sorted out. 1 ton of plastic waste to be in scope. Does that include packaging or just in the product? So two different things. Electronics are 1 ton, packaging's 1 ton. And they're not combined together, they're separate, but it's all electronics, including the non-plastic parts, and all packaging. But yeah, they're 1 ton separately. Just looking for the employees' disposals are included and must be reported. If the business in their bin, for whatever reason, has over 1 ton of plastic waste a year, it's included. Now, you need a lot of employees to get up to that point. You need about 100 to get up to 1 ton plastic a year. Battery cells like AA, AAA, et cetera, electronic accessories are in scope of 2025 reporting under the electronics category. Batteries are not specifically called out as a category. They can be inside electronics. What we've defined for that is there is no good definition in the Canadian version. The best, since they use EU ROHS categories, we'll use the EU rules, and batteries are not part of that. So right now we're excluding batteries. We are collecting their data, but we are excluding batteries from the reporting, batteries themselves. If we get further guidance, we might change that. So we keep the data on batteries. We're not currently including. My company was sold the end of last year. Who needs to do the 2025 reporting? The brand owner today. So in the sales thing, there may be an instruction in it of who is responsible for legacy things. Because in the contract might say, hey, any compliance requirement for 2024 is the original entity and the new stuff's 2025. So it would be in the sale contract who's responsible for compliance for legacy. Who has inherited legacy compliance? It's defined there. The Canadian government, as long as somebody reports, they're happy. One of the two. But usually in the sale, it'll say who's responsible for legacy compliance and then follow that. And it's really a business, by whatever the business arrangement is, who's taking legacy compliance on. Because there's usually lots of legacy stuff, taxation. What happens, if they find a tax finding for you in 2 years ago, who's responsible for that? So it's usually built in. Thanks again, everyone. Really good attendance. A lot of great questions. Always super appreciate the questions. Please feel to reach out. If you haven't reached out before, it's getting really busy on this. I really suggest sooner. It's harder than you think, and it is technical, very technical. But there's a lot of inputs needed from different stakeholders, and that causes delays. And there isn't an extension process for this. So I really suggest getting on it. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to help. Again, everybody who registered receive a copy of the slides, and there should be a recording available momentarily in YouTube. Thanks again, and talk to everyone again soon.